The night was dark, and a full moon hung in the sky as the evening wind blew lightly. After listening to Lu Muyan's words, Luoli continued to ask, "But have you never encountered a large beast tide?" "No. If we encountered a large beast tide, what you see right now might just be my corpse." Lu Muyan joked. Naturally, she wouldn't reveal Mo Yan's abilities. "You guys are so lucky," Luoli said with a smile, "but most of the large beast tides gathering in the competition space are generally near the core city or larger cities. It's natural that you haven't encountered them before. The refuge city ahead is a large city, right?" Lu Muyan asked. Luoli nodded and reminded, "After passing the city, I suggest you don't travel at night. On this road to the next large city, there will not only be frequent beast tides at night, but there may also be large-sized beast tides." Thank you for the reminder. Lu Muyan wasn't really afraid of large-sized beast tides. After all, she had the human-eating Bloodthorn Vine King and the other spirit pets. She knew just how powerful they were at group killings. But large-sized beast tides were generally led by Tier 7 demonic beasts, which were a little bit troublesome. However, if her cultivation base advanced to Sword Monarch, then she would have the ability to fight against Tier 7 demonic beasts and no need to be so polite. Luoli smiled. "You have all been hunting and waiting for demonic beasts in the large city ahead to earn points?" Lu Muyan began to ask instead. Luoli replied, Teams from many kingdoms who come to participate in the competition will stay in one city for a period of time before changing to another city." "How long have you been at this city?" "It's been almost a month. We're going to Chance cities in the next few days. The demonic beasts in the mountains nearby were all practically hunted by them, plus there was the issue of time, so they should change. Is there anything we need to pay attention to if we want to stay in a city for a long time?" Lu Muyan continued to ask. "Just don't mess with large kingdoms that occupy the city. Generally, a large city would be occupied by the teams of large kingdoms or a superpower kingdom. Sword masters from other kingdoms can enter, but if they dare to snatch and kill demonic beasts, their result is usually death," Luoli said. "Then don't all the points in the latter stage fall into the hands of the large kingdoms and superpower kingdoms? Not allowing other kingdoms to snatch and kill demonic beasts, then other kingdoms couldn't earn points at all." Luoli knew that Lu Muyan was from a small kingdom, so she didn't know a lot of rules, and since his impression of her was pretty good, he explained a little. Each time, the top 100 of the Tianling continent tournament for hegemony are basically teams from large kingdoms and superpower kingdoms. It's particularly prominent in the first round of the competition. This is because everyone tacitly follows this sort of domineering and forceful principle, maintaining unified interests, Luoli bluntly told her. This was precisely the self-confidence that the people of superpower kingdoms were born with. He didn't intend to show off in front of Lu Muyan, only telling her a fact and law of survival. "It's like this every time? There hasn't been a single small or medium-sized kingdom that broke through?" Lu Muyan asked, remaining indifferent. "Isn't not that there haven't been, but very rare. Every few tournaments, there'd be one or two dark horse teams who will appear and squeeze into the top 100. Luoli added, "But since the start of the continental tournament for hegemony, only 2 sword masters from medium and small kingdoms have entered the top 10 in the finals, but neither have ranked among the top 5. At this time, Lu Muyan also understood how difficult it was to be in the top 10 in every round of the competition. Their medium and small kingdoms weren't only facing one team from a large kingdom or superpower kingdom, but they had to face them all. However, being difficult didn't mean that she would shrink back. Her temperament had always been to grow more courageous the more she battled. The more challenging something was, the more motivation and the more interesting it was. No? Are there alliances between medium and small-sized kingdoms? If there were tacit agreements between large kingdoms, then teams from small and medium kingdoms should also have alliances. Luoli replied with a smile, "Naturally there is, but there are many small and medium-sized kingdoms who will choose to rely on the large kingdoms in the end to ensure that they won't be at the bottom of the final ranking sprint. What's your goal?" Luoli just felt that she wouldn't limit herself to the 49th place. Lu Muyan's lips curled into a confident and dazzling smile, "Top 10. Hearing her words, many sword masters revealed a look as if saying she had overrated herself. They didn't deny that this young girl's strength was indeed ranked in the upper reaches, but she was indulging in the wildest fantasy to want to compete with the elite teams of superpower kingdoms and large kingdoms. Luo's footsteps paused, then continued to move forward. Their speed wasn't as fast as when they came, but it wasn't slow either. He didn't look down on Lu Muyan's goal or laugh at her for being overly ambitious. In his eyes, sword masters who didn't dare to think and didn't dare to do would never become one of the strong. Lu Muyan already possessed the temperament and ability that a strong person should possess. If there were no accidents, then she would certainly be the dark horse of this session. "Then I wish you success." Luoli was startled, then a smile spread across his lips and there was no contempt in his words. This woman truly dared to think. As someone who came from a superpower kingdom, he also had the thought of competing for the top 10, but the goal he had set for himself was only to advance into the top 20. He didn't feel Lu Muyan's thought was naive. One only dared to do if they dared to think it. On this point, the two brothers' thoughts were the same. "Thank you." After chatting with Luoli for so long, Lu Muyan's impression of him also became much better. This young man had a pure heart, but wasn't stupid, nor did he possess arrogance or the hedonistic problems of considering everyone and everything beneath him. This was the upbringing and demeanor of a genius pupil raised in a distinguished clan of superpower kingdoms. The two chatted a little more, and Lu Muyan learned of many unheard of news from him, including the situation of the other 4 superpower kingdoms team. Walking towards the front of the city, Lu Muyan saw many people standing on the city wall, their eyes all on her. She furrowed her brows and ignored it. It was probably because of the beast tide that they paid more attention to her. "Well, go to the resting area to rest. Well, bid farewell now." Lu Mu Yen said with a smile to Luo Li after walking into the city. At this time, the inns wouldn't have any vacant rooms. Large cities might not even have any rooms available during the day either. Alright. See you again. Luo Li could see that she didn't want to be with them, so he didn't keep them any longer. See you again. Luo Yi, who had been silent the entire time, looked up at Lu Mu Yen and said slowly, his voice like a spring breeze passing by, soft and gentle. Lu Mu Yen smiled and said, see you again. After speaking, she, together with Yun Zmo and the others, went straight to the resting areas in the city. While she had her eyes closed, meditating to rest, many people stuck their heads over to observe them, and occasionally even quietly discussed a little. But they didn't dare be presumptuous because they couldn't figure out their relationship with Lord Luo and his party. Mu Yen, do we need to change to traveling during the day tomorrow? Lu Mu Yen arranged a soundproof array wherever she went, no need. Well, still travel at night. Seeing that they were puzzled, she continued, during the day, the places where the demonic beasts appear are all occupied by large kingdoms. It's not good for us to snatch it forcefully either. At night, with Mo Yen, large beast tides can naturally be avoided. We can only do that. The night was gradually replaced by day. Morning light scattered softly, and all the people in the resting area except Lu Mu Yen and her team went out hunting. This city was a large city, but it was still a lot smaller than the large cities in the central area. Rongza Kingdom who controlled this city weren't domineering either, so they didn't prevent sword masters from hunting demonic beasts nearby to earn points. Of course, after entering the central area, the large cities under the control of superpower kingdoms would no longer allow sword masters of small and medium-sized kingdoms to hunt, so sword masters gathered in this sort of large city the most. Although there was no one in the resting area, but it was still a public place after all, so they still found an inn to stay at. Yenner, you seem to have an unusual attitude towards that Lord Luo. Lu Mu Bai knew about little sister's disposition. She wouldn't pull a long face towards people she was unfamiliar with, but her attitude would also not be enthusiastic. Lu Mu Yan's eyes narrowed into a crescent moon shape as she smiled. There's indeed a difference. The other people looked at her one after another. Could it be that Lu Mu Yan took a fancy to that Lord Luo? That man's noble temperament could make many people feel ashamed of themselves. Yunlan and Qi Yixian's eyes dulled slightly, and they were both a little depressed. Lu Mu Yan naturally understood what the few people were thinking and said with amusement, what were you thinking? I just like his voice. She wasn't the kind of person who could fall in love with someone at first sight. When she first met Ming Xiu, she didn't feel her heart beat for him, though that guy's voice was very devilishly charming and magnetic. Only after several encounters later, with Ming Xiu's rescues and him defending her, did he gradually leave traces in her heart. Voice? The others were puzzled. I have a good impression of anyone with a clean and pleasant voice. It has nothing to do with the relationship between a man and a woman. She only had a good impression of Lord Luo. If she could become friends with him in the future, she would befriend him, but it was impossible for her to feel anything surpassing friendship with him. The few people couldn't resist twitching their eyelids. What kind of weird illness was this? So it turned out that Lu Mu Yen would also have such times of little willfulness. Don't you think that Lord Luo's voice is ethereal and clean, and very pleasant? Lu Mu Yen asked, blinking. The several people's impressions of Lord Luo didn't come from his voice, but after hearing Lu Mu Yen say this, in retrospect, the voice was indeed nice, like a flowing sweet spring, clear and translucent. Indeed it's nice. But we don't have such a hobby. I'll go wander around this city later, let's leave at the same time in the evening. They now had their own experience in killing medium-sized beast tides, so their elemental energy hadn't been completely exhausted and had been replenished last night. After lunch, the several people went shopping in the commercial street in the city. With their current cultivation base, they were capable of inedia, but they just wanted to have the atmosphere when eating. As expected, large cities were different. There were not only a lot of pill stores here, but also a spirit pet store. There were many demonic beasts in the competition space, and there were large forces stationed here, so they naturally could also go out of the city to hunt demonic beasts. Lu Mu Yen went in and casually wandered around but didn't buy anything. She had already helped each of her team members contract a tier 6 spirit pet when encountering medium-sized beast tides, so she naturally wouldn't waste money. Meanwhile Yun Zmo and the others were shocked and they saw the price of tier 6 spirit pets. Even if their backgrounds were extremely well off back in Yanzhou Kingdom, but even for them, personally, they wouldn't be able to take out this much money to buy it. Thinking of Lu Mu Yan's fussy and nonchalant attitude when she helped them contract a spirit pet each, they couldn't resist holding their foreheads. Did she know the value of tier 6 demonic beasts at the time? Put away those surprised looks in your eyes. Our goal is to catch a few tier 7 demonic beasts to contract as spirit pets. The several people felt speechless. How was it that when she spoke of catching tier 7 demonic beasts, it was as if she just considered it as playing around? After some shopping in the city, Lu Mu Yen bought several kinds of spiritual herbs for refining grade 3 pills. Although the price was very expensive, but she didn't feel as if her flesh hurt. These spiritual herbs could only grow in this competition space, they couldn't be bought even with money outside. And just after the several people walked out of the pill shop, at the end of the commercial street, several people were watching them leave. Linger, that woman is that Lu Mu Yen who made a big show on the glacial mountain range? Shui Linger retracted her gaze, with a soft smile on her face. She's precisely Lu Mu Yen. Not only did she seek the limelight in the glacial mountain range, but there are also voices everywhere discussing her in this competition space. There weren't many emotions that could be heard in her tone when speaking of Lu Mu Yen. The first time she saw Lu Mu Yen, she hated her. This sort of hatred continued to deepen over time. Lu Mu Yan's growth was too fast, and the Shui clan and Ling clan had already reached the point of incompatibility like fire and water. Seeing the rare interest in the eyes of the 7th prince when he mentioned Lu Mu Yen, Shui Linger felt even more hate in her heart. Last time, that woman had attracted Yi Qing Han to speak to her so pleasantly, and now with only one glance, she could make this arrogant seventh prince show such an expression. She truly was a vixen. For someone with a deep background like the seventh prince, she also had her ideas. After all, the Shui clan's background and foundation was far inferior to his. If she could climb this big tree, her status in the Shui clan would definitely skyrocket and suppress that good eldest brother down. She clenched her fists and curbed her thoughts. Those men would only be interested in Lu Muyan for a short while. She had her own way of conquering men, and she was still very confident in her own charm. This time, she would not let go of the seventh prince from an elite team of a large kingdom that she was able to cling to. The woman you hate has already discovered us. Mo Yan's voice sounded in Lu Muyan's sea of consciousness. Lu Muyan's eyes were dyed with a bit of coldness as she smiled devilishly. We will have endless fun in the days to come. She had already discovered Schwellinger and her group just now. Although her mental energy was still dormant, but her senses were still sharper than ordinary people. She naturally felt the killing intent from that woman. It seemed that without her attacking, that woman would still take the initiative to send herself to their door. Interesting. Bing Ji shuddered while standing on her shoulder. Owner was up to mischief again. As night fell, Lu Muyan and the others set out from the city. When they left the city, they happened to meet Luo Li and the others who had just returned from hunting. Lu Muyan, you're still going to travel at night again? Luo Li furrowed his brows and asked after approaching them. He had already explained the situation with the beast tides to this woman, so how could they still choose to travel and hunt at night? Did they really want to die? Lu Muyan also knew that Luo Li was well-intentioned, so she smiled lightly and said, we're very lucky, so we shouldn't encounter a large beast tide. Tonight, there will be a large beast tide along the only path from this city to the next city. Luo Ye's voice sounded slowly. Did you divine that again? Lu Muyan asked. Luo Ye's handsome and clean face revealed a very shallow smile, giving people the feeling of a spring breeze. Yes, so you should stay in the refuge city tonight. The other people of Rongza Empire looked at Luo Yi a little inexplicably. Young lord didn't seem like someone who liked to meddle in others' business. Lu Muyan lowered her eyes, making a pondering gesture, then raised her head and smiled sweetly. Thank you for your warning. But we are still going to continue on our way. You really want points to the point you don't want your life. Life. Luo Li glared at her. Why was this woman so stubborn? Whether I want my life or not, you'll know when we meet again next time. Lu Muyan's bright eyes shone with dazzling brilliance, which made Luo Li dazed for a moment. He recovered in an instant and his face was a little hot. This woman's eyes were so sparkling and so beautiful. Good luck to you all. Luo Yi smiled softly and stopped Luo Li, who still wanted to speak. Thank you. Lu Muyan nodded with a smile, gave Yun Zmo and the others a look, then headed straight out of the city gate. Luo Yi seemed to have a kind of divination and prediction ability. No wonder he had the ailment of blindness. If he wasn't born like this, then it might be due to a curse. Afterwards, her eyes lit up with burning fighting intent. She might be able to break through the peak phase Sword King bottleneck. Yenner, you want to go block the large beast tide? Lu Mubai was a little helpless towards the battle intent in little sister's eyes. How did she grow more and more interested in battling? As long as we kill a large beast tide, my points can advance into the top 30. Lu Muyan nodded. Fu Chen rubbed his chin and thought about it, then said, but with our abilities, even with your spirit pets, it'll still be difficult to kill a large-sized beast tide, right? It wasn't that he was afraid to die, but there just weren't any chances of success. Lu Muyan curled her lips. They will follow. They? Who? Fu Chen asked. You'll know when the time comes. Lu Muyan blinked. At the gate of the city, Luo Li furrowed his brows and asked, Elder brother, does that woman and the others not want their lives anymore? How do you know they don't want their lives? Do you really think they relied on luck for so many nights? Luo Yi replied calmly. You mean to say that they're specifically going for the beast tides? Luo Li finally understood why Lu Muyan's eyes looked that scorching and bright. So it was because she heard that his elder brother had divined that a large-sized beast tide would appear, that's why she was so happy. But with just them, can they really block the beast tide? That woman wanted to fight the tier 7 demonic beast leader at only peak phase Sword King? Her brain must have spasmed. And those men are letting her fool around. The more Luo Li said, the more he felt that Lu Muyan and the others were going there to kill themselves. Why do you care so much about that Lu Muyan? Could it be that you fell for her? A baby-faced man standing behind Luo Li patted him on the shoulder. You don't say, that woman is actually quite flavorful. This was the first time that he had seen such a tough woman, and it was much more pleasing to the eye than those who cried all day long and looked soft and weak. Luo Li was dazed for a moment, then turned his head and glared at him fiercely. Don't speak nonsense, how could I like such a violent woman? However, Lu Muyan's calm and composed figure when killing demonic beasts suddenly rose in his mind, as well as the appearance of her clever and beautiful smiles with those glistening eyes. His heart was slightly hot. Was this like? Shouldn't be. TSK, look at you with your lovesick look, what else could it be but that you fell for her? The baby-faced man thought to himself when he saw his embarrassed expression. Luo Li couldn't have really fallen in love with Lu Muyan, could he? Luo Li snorted coldly. I'm too lazy to care about you. He was just interested in that woman. Love at first sight wouldn't happen to him. Yes, that must be it. Luo Yi sighed slightly. It seemed that the love calamity that younger brother would have to endure should happen because of Lu Muyan. His heart that had been as calm as water was now as if a stone was tossed in it. Should he stop it? Elder brother, why don't we follow and have a look? Luo Li looked up and saw that Lu Muyan and the others' figures had long disappeared into the night. He couldn't resist saying, I'm just curious how they can stop the large beast tide. Then he explained with a dry laugh. The baby-faced man winked and said with a smile, explaining is concealing. Such a woman indeed made a man's heart move for her easily, especially a man like Luo Li who was always being paid respects to by groups of delicate and gentle women. It wasn't impossible to fall in love at first sight when suddenly meeting Lu Muyan, a strong woman with an independent and confident personality. Then let's go. Luo Yi closed his eyes, let everything take the natural course. The others didn't expect that Lord Luo would let Luo Li do as he pleased, but he was the leader, so they wouldn't object to his decision. Elder brother. Luo Li raised his head and looked at Luo Yi. His elder brother usually wasn't one to like minding someone else's business, but today was a little different. Let's also go earn some points. Luo Yi turned around and spoke slowly. There was a bright smile on Luo Li's handsome, vibrant face. That's right, I'm only ranked 3 places higher than that woman. The several people who were about to enter the city stopped, turned around, and went out the city gate again. Lord Luo, are you leaving the city? He Lianlai asked as he walked over, looking at Luo Yi with a smile. 7th Prince. Luo Yi nodded lightly. He Lianlai didn't go out of the city to hunt today, but instead took Xuelinger and his team to stroll around the city, then went to a nearby waterfall with a beautiful scenery for a tour. He already saw Luo Yi talking to a group of people earlier, and he saw the figure of a woman with them, who looked like Lu Muyan. It was just that the group left quickly. What surprised him was that Luo Yi and his party not only stopped entering the city but were also preparing to leave the city. He wondered if there were any secrets. You're leaving the city this late? Luo Li saw that He Lianlai held a folding fan, wore splendid, creamy, moon-white brocade clothing, with a very carefree and suave attitude, which matched the legendary unrestrained and amorous seed he was known as. We still have something else to do, so well go first. His brows furrowed even more deeply. If they were any later, Lu Muyan and the others' figures wouldn't be able to be seen anymore. He Lianlai didn't want to just let the few people go like this. He stepped forward and said with a smile, Lord Luo, if there's something good, why don't you call us together? He came from the strongest kingdom in the eastern region, Dongxuan Kingdom, and their overall national strength was no weaker than that of the large kingdoms in the southern and northern regions. Although he couldn't match the foundation of a superpower kingdom, but he could still be considered equal in front of Luo Yi. I divined that there will be a large beast tide in the south tonight and am preparing to go. If you want to follow, I have no problem. Luo Yi's voice was very light and there was a bit of coldness. After speaking, without waiting for He Lianlai to answer, he took Luo Li and the rest, leaping towards one direction, quickly disappearing in everyone's sight. Seeing Luo Yi and the others quickly disappearing, He Lianlai narrowed his eyes and made a decision. Go. He waved his hand and led the team along with him. Block a large beast tide? Go lie to a ghost. Xuelinger stared at Luo Yi's back with infatuation. This man was Lord Luo, one of those who had the possibility of competing for the top 3 in the finals. That noble temperament, the unparalleled beauty, and especially those pair of clean eyes that made people unable to resist being sucked in, heard the sound of her own heartbeat. He Lianlai led them to chase after them, and she didn't hesitate to call her team to follow. For Lord Luo, her heart had really moved. She must find a way to obtain that man. Lu Muyan and her party were very fast, but they were still caught up by Luo Yi and his party after an hour. Why did you come? Lu Muyan asked with a smile. Luo Li raised an eyebrow and said, we're naturally here to block the large beast tide. Up to you all. Lu Muyan looked at him amusedly, then continued to move forward. Yunzi Mo and the others all had confusion in their eyes. Bing Ji was also very curious, so he asked telepathically, little owner, how did you know that the one surnamed Luo would come? I felt it. Lu Muyan said. She found that Luo Li's eyes carried curiosity and a desire to find out, so she guessed that he would ask to follow. Lord Luo was cold, but he pampered Luo Li very much, so she had a feeling he would agree to follow. Her sixth sense had always been very accurate, that's why she would say such a thing. With the addition of Lord Luo and the others, it was indeed easier for them to destroy a large beast tied together. Bing Ji rolled his eyes. Owner, go lie to a ghost. Mo Yen, how far is the distance left from the large beast tide? Lu Muyan asked. Mo Yen looked ahead, there's still another 2 hours to go. Arrive there within 2 hours. They should be gathering and preparing to attack the city. Mo Yen added after retrieving his demonic sense. Lu Muyan turned to Yunzi Mo and the others and said, speed up and arrive within 2 hours. Then she used flash steps and quickly headed towards the direction where the beast tide was gathering. The others didn't hold back when they saw it and they sped up, following her closely. Why did that woman go in that direction? Luo Li asked while rushing. Luo Yi replied, she's going to the place where the beast tide is gathering, and the purpose should be to block the beast tide from attacking the city. There was a hint of confusion in him. How could Lu Muyan judge the direction and time of the gathering of the beast tide so accurately? No wonder they dared to travel at night unscrupulously for more than half a month before. There indeed was a secret. He Lianlai and his party also followed closely behind and quickened their pace. 2 hours later, roar roar. The deafening roar of beasts resounded through the heavens and earth. When Lu Muyan and the others arrived at a plain, under the cool moonlight, they saw densely packed, sturdy figures constantly moving around the plain. When Luo Yi and the others arrived there, they saw that there were no less than 2,000 high-level and middle-level demonic beasts. How could they deal with so many demonic beasts with only a dozen of them? In the past, when they were in the refuge city, the beast tides attacked in waves from low level to high level. At that time, they didn't feel the horror of a large-sized beast tide. Luo Li took a deep breath and looked up to see Lu Muyan looking so eager to attack. You can retreat first if you're afraid. Lu Muyen turned her head and said lightly, it was naturally better to have Lord Luo and the others join, but without them, it wouldn't affect the overall situation. Who's afraid? Luo Li instantly exploded, you really can't tell good from bad. He huffed and let go of Lu Muyen's arm, I don't care if you go die. He said that, but his eyes were fixed on Lu Muyen, looking as if he was saying if you dared to go up, there won't be an end to me. Lu Muyen let out a low chuckle. This young man was quite funny. I have confidence. Lu Muyen had a gentle smile on her lips, like the morning light in winter. Luo Li's heart constricted and hurriedly turned his head away to stop looking at her. The way this woman smiled, and her eyes were so beautiful. Roar roar. They had yet to attack, but the leader of the demonic beasts had discovered them. Countless beast roars sounded, howling and roaring, rushing in their direction. Young lord, what should we do? The older, middle-aged man asked with deep, furrowed brows, and looked at Lord Luo. If he knew that the large beast tide was this fierce, they should have persuaded the two of them before. He suddenly felt a little displeased with Lu Muyen. Wait a little. Luo Yi said. Lu Muyen, should we go? Fu Qin swallowed as he watched the beasts rushing over heavens. Why so many? Lu Muyen's hands kept forming seals and 7 pure white jade stones were thrown by her, forming an arc in front of them and falling into different positions, instantly submerging into the ground. Don't worry. Lu Muyen gave the several people a reassuring look, and a confident and rebellious smile appeared on her lips. Points are currently beckoning at us. She was still thinking about points. This woman was a lunatic. The people present couldn't resist holding their forehead. In the castle in the center of the competition field, the elders of the 6 major sects stared at the crystal wall. That girl is too crazy. The strong and sturdy elder of the 8 extreme sect laughed, but I like it. The elders of the other sects were speechless. A little reckless this time. The elder of the heavenly secret palace said. Lu Muyen was probably dazzled by the previous victories, and even pulled Luo Yi and the others down together. After all, she's still young. Originally thought she was a composed one, who knew that she would overrate her own abilities. The elder of the sword sect sighed and felt a sense of disappointment in his heart. The elder of the medicine sect said with pity, I'm afraid that she would fall tonight. Large beast tides indeed meant a steady stream of points, but if these points were so easy to obtain, then the elite teams of the superpower kingdoms would have been dispatched long ago. Why is Luo Yi also being reckless together? An elder from the heavenly secret palace who was very optimistic about Luo Yi furrowed his brows. Inwardly, he wasn't worried that Luo Yi would fall here due to the large beast tide. After all, with Luo Yi's strength, it would be more than enough for him to escape. But the act of joining in the fun inevitably made them dissatisfied. Rubbish, what reckless, what do you know? The elder of the 8 extreme sect swept the few people who spoke with his gaze. That girl must have some means, if you don't believe me, just wait and see. Humph, vulgar. The elder of the sword sect shook his sleeves. The other elders all knew the temperament of the elder of the 8 extreme sect, so they didn't fuss about it, but they didn't believe that Lu Muyen, that girl, would have some means to escape from this large beast tide. Yes. They never thought that these two groups of people could destroy this large beast tide. It would already be good not to have lost half the people. The black eyes of the handsome, white-clothed young man sitting in the very last row that were deep like the sea and bright like the stars died with coldness. His family's little woman would surprise these people. On the great plains of the competition space. Roar roar. Boom boom. The roar of demonic beasts accompanied by the trembling of the earth resounded throughout the plain. Lu Muyan's eyes swept to the group of demonic beasts that were rushing over. Her eyes narrowed, then she turned her head to Yun Zmo and the others and said, I'll use an array, you all take advantage of it and kill. Alright. Yun Zmo and the others were originally still a little worried, but they calmed down when they saw the calm and determined expression on Lu Muyan's face. She, a woman, wasn't even afraid, so what were they, as men, afraid of? This kind of stimulation made their hair stand on end, and they held their long sword tightly, ready to attack at any time. Bing Ji, I don't want anyone to fall here. Lu Muyen instructed Bing Ji. Bing Ji's eyes were no longer filled with silly smiles, but instead, a layer of prudence. Little owner, don't worry, if anything unusual happens, they'll take them away. The reason why Lu Muyen dared to bring Yun Zmo and the others to intercept the large beast tide was because Bing Ji had the flying ability of a tier 8 demonic beast. If they wanted to escape, as long as a tier 9 demonic beast didn't appear, then other demonic beasts wouldn't be able to catch up at all. Rise! Lu Muyen shouted lightly after the seal was completed with both hands. The 7 pure white jade stones underground instantly exuded a bright soft light and spun ceaselessly. Clusters of flames suddenly erupted from the ground and the whole sky reflected the red glow, illuminating the ground a lot. The flames that shot up into the sky stopped just in front of Lu Muyen and the others, and the scorching temperature gradually increased. Many demonic beasts who rushed over hated this heat and stopped in their tracks one after another. 7-star fire array, appear. The black array flag separated from Lu Muyen's hand and flew into the air, the flag slowly unfolding. With each spontaneous shake, a cluster of flames would erupt from one direction, eventually forming the shape of 7 stars, trapping the demonic beasts within the firewall frames. Such a scene made He Lianlai and the others, who had just arrived, completely dumbstruck. What sort of array was this? It was simply unheard of, let alone seen. Luo Li's eyes opened wide, this woman's so strong. To be able to condense so much fire elemental energy, just to what layer had this woman, Lu Muyen, comprehended the fire element to? No wonder she was so confident that she could deal with large beast tides. Using such an array to separate the initially grouped demonic beasts that formed a thick line, now without a leader, they could be crushed separately. Each wave of trapped demonic beasts was only equivalent to a small beast tide, so it was naturally much easier to kill. He couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration, and his heart beat even more violently. Luo Yi also never thought that Lu Mu Yen would still have such means. By simply looking at her fire elemental energy condensation and array attainments, even he couldn't resist praising her heaven-defying talent. Go! Lu Mu Yen nodded to Yun Zmo and the others, then flew into one of the fire frames first. The shock in Yun Zmo and the others' hearts were no less than that of the rest. Lu Mu Yen was able to fight in a variety of ways each time. This time, her means were already beyond words to describe for them. But they didn't hesitate too much. According to the usual hunting rules, they each chose a few frames and flew in. Instantly, countless sword auras and sword lights accompanied the 7-star fire array, illuminating the entire dark night. In a large city not far away, several people also leapt down the city wall at the same time and soon disappeared into the night. The direction they disappeared in was the location of the beast tide. Elder brother, let's go too. Luo Li couldn't help but say with itchy hands when he saw that the people in the array were killing heartily. Luo Yi nodded, The rest of their team could no longer express the shock in their hearts at this time. It seemed that the rumors were nothing. Only by personally seeing this woman could they know that she wasn't simple at all. Led by Luo Yi and Luo Li, Rongzi Kingdom's team leapt into several fire frames that had no one. The demonic beasts inside were like headless flies running around chaotically. Wave after wave of demonic beasts were killed like this, but there were even more demonic beasts who were not afraid of death, continuing to rush in here. Even if one rushed into a place without flames, as soon as one stepped into the area of the array, clusters of gorgeous flames would rise from the ground, forming a fire frame and trapping them. Shue Shue hid his body within the array and strips of golden vines probed up from underground, hiding under the corpses of the demonic beasts and madly absorbing blood essence. Mo Yan's body suddenly grew larger and took down one with each claw. Each time, the demonic beast's crystal core would be crushed and refined on the spot, and the demonic energy in his body that was consumed would be replenished immediately. Let's go too. He Lian Lai took out the purple jade tablet and saw those names on the rankings that kept jumping. An amorous and unrestrained smile rose on his face. He picked a fire frame with few people and flew in. According to the rumors, Lord Luo never lied. It seemed to be the case. But today sure was an eye-opener. Lu Mu Yen, this woman, wasn't only beautifully stunning and possessed great strength, but her talent was even heaven-defying. Even he had the thought of wanting to take her back to marry as his prince's wife. If Lu Mu Yen knew about He Lian Lai's thoughts, she would definitely snort in contempt. She didn't care for whatever prince's wife. On this continent, she wouldn't be bound by any identity or status. 10 flying swords dashed through the demonic beasts, like a harvester, and the crystal cores of the demonic beasts flew into her hands one after another. She put away some of them and crushed the rest one after another, directly absorbing and refining them, while transforming them into spiritual energy through the green sea of fog in her dantian. As long as there was a steady stream of spiritual energy, then the fire elemental energy that kept the array running would not be exhausted. This 7-star fire array was completely improvised by her on the way here. She used the principle of the 7-star killing array, used the spirit tools she nourished as 7 separate fire sources, and, finally, used the fire elemental energy condensation to construct the fire frames, separating the group of beasts so that they could attack and destroy them individually. Shue Linger looked at Lu Mu Yen who appeared and disappeared in the firelight in disbelief. How was this possible? When did Lu Mu Yen have such talent for arrays? She couldn't be left alive. She absolutely couldn't let Lu Mu Yen leave the competition space alive. Linger, let's go and earn points. Xianing Xian didn't have the chance to participate in the continental tournament for hegemony. 2 men represented the Xian clan, and one of them was even an admirer of Shue Linger. Shue Linger's nails were deeply embedded into her palm. She didn't even feel any pain when a few drops of blood spilled out. Was Lord Luo here for Lu Mu Yen? No. It couldn't be. Despite seeing that Lord Luo and Lu Mu Yen were fighting on their own without any communication through eye contact or verbal communication, the jealousy in her heart still didn't weaken, and instead, she hated Lu Mu Yen even more. This woman stole the dazzling brilliance that should have belonged to her. She should be the target of the young talent's attention. One day, she would step on Lu Mu Yen in public in this space. But now she naturally wouldn't reveal any killing intent towards Lu Mu Yen. She looked at the people in the fire with worried eyes and said, let's also go help them too. In the fire frame closest to the few people, Luo Li was hunting bravely, wanting to try to surpass Lu Mu Yen. When he heard Shue Linger's gentle voice, he furrowed his brows unhappily. What did she mean by helping them? She just wanted to earn points, yet she actually wanted to use such a high-sounding reason to cover it up. Fake and artificial, how disgusting. He turned his head and looked at the purple figure that constantly shuttled back and forth in the firelight. That beautiful little face was filled with domineering and unrestrained freeness. He revealed a smile. Ultimately, a woman like Lu Mu Yen was more likable. Inside the castle at the center of the competition area. What? An elder of the sword sect stared motionlessly at the crystal wall. This is too surprising. Haha, the strong and sturdy old man of the 8 Extremes sect laughed loudly. Like I said, this girl has a backup move, but you don't believe me, now you've been face-slapped. Towards his words, the other people's cheeks twitched, but they didn't answer. No one wanted to bother with him. Don't be too happy so early, that tier 7 demonic beast leader hasn't appeared yet. The elder of the heavenly secret palace with wise eyes said slowly. Although he was also shocked by Lu Mu Yan's talent and methods, but such a result didn't mean that they were victorious. In addition to the large number of demonic beasts in a large beast tide, the most difficult to deal with was the leader, the transformation stage demon cultivator. He just didn't know if the initiator of this beast tide would appear or not. Should we make a move? The elder of the medicine sect watched the pure fire elemental energy condensed by Lu Muyen on the crystal wall, and increasingly felt that she was definitely a good seedling for alchemy. If she died in the hands of a tier 7 demonic beast, that would be a pity. The elder of the heavenly secret palace glanced at him and said lightly, if we take action, we'll be breaking the rules of the competition space. Absolutely not allowed. This the elder of the medicine sect could only sigh, hoping that the tier 7 demonic beast wouldn't appear. The several other elders also had their own thoughts. They all hoped that Lu Muyen could survive this large beast tide. When the tier 7 demonic beast appears, just let Luo Yi and He Lian Lai and the other men go up. As men, they have to take responsibility. The elder of the 8 extreme sect snorted, dissatisfied. Lu Muyen was his favored definitive pupil. Even if she couldn't make it to the top 100 in the finals, he would still coax her to go back with him to the sect. Of course, he believed that Lu Muyen was definitely the dark horse of this competition. The handsome, white-clothed man in the back row furrowed his brows when he heard what he said. His family's little woman didn't need other men to protect her at all. The several elders from the other sects couldn't help but twitch the corner of their lips and didn't bother paying attention to him. In their eyes, the 8 extreme sect was just a broken house. At the grand tournaments of the 6 major sects, they were always last. This old man also just loved to argue tediously and vexatiously, so it was best to ignore him. On the plain illuminated by firelight, an elegant, refined-looking man in a long robe stood in midair with his hands behind his back, watching the waves of demonic beasts sending themselves to their deaths indifferently. His eyes locked onto Lu Muyen, who was maneuvering around in the fire array. He just didn't believe that her elemental energy wouldn't dry up sometime. That woman's special method of dealing with beast tides sure was very useful. He closed his eyes, no longer instructing the demonic beasts below to find a way to break though, but instead, slowly recollected the array below in order to find a flaw or solution. At this moment, several figures came near from afar in the horizon, standing with their hands behind their backs in their own positions. Mo Ling, I didn't expect you to come to watch the fun too. Yan Jun, dressed in a flamboyant red, looked at the prideful and cool man with a smile. Mo Ling ignored Yan Jun, who teased him and cast his gaze on the array and battles on the plain, with a rare expression of interest in his eyes. He also had an exceptionally strong talent for arrays, but he was still inferior to the person who could arrange this sort of fire array. Who arranged this fire array? He slowly opened his mouth after a while, obviously asking Yan Jun. Yan Jun raised an eyebrow. I arrived at the same time as you, so I naturally didn't see who arranged the array. He glanced at the people below. Oh, the sun must be coming up from the west today. I didn't expect Luo Yi to participate in the hunt below. Could it be him who arranged the array? Yan Jun touched his chin, a little puzzled. It stood to reason that among the people below, only Luo Yi had the strength to arrange this kind of array, but being rivals for so long, he hadn't heard that Luo Yi was proficient in arrays, and instead, Mo Ling was the master of arrays. Mo Ling denied it. It couldn't have been arranged by Luo Yi. Then who arranged that? Luo Li? Although that kid's main cultivation was with the fire element, but he couldn't arrange such an array, right? Yan Jun asked. Mo Ling fell silent for a while, then said, well no, if we keep watching, aren't you going to go earn some points? Mo Ling's voice was cold and prideful. I won't lower myself to go snatch points. Why, are you going? If you don't go, I'm naturally too lazy to participate. Yan Jun curled his lips and looked down with interest. There were also a few people hidden not far from the two of them who didn't reveal themselves, but they were all powerful, obviously attracted by the strangeness in the sky here. But none of them participated in it either, as if coming here was just to watch a play. Linger felt the auras of many powerhouses, and she decided to move. She called the people in her team to step up into the array to hunt demonic beasts. She had a curvaceous figure and wore a light green dress which set off her gentle and generous temperament even more. She sneered inwardly. With Lu Muyan's vulgar and violent appearance, she was basically a tigress. Probably very few men would really like it, and the attraction would only be temporary. While imagining Lu Muyen being stepped on by her, she flew up and was about to enter the array but was blocked by a wall of fire. Lu Muyen stood within the array and the firelight reflected on her delicate and beautiful face, flickering on and off, with a vague sense of mystery. People like you want to come in and reap benefits in the confusion? You think you're worthy? Lu Muyen walked out of the fire frames with her arms folded, looking at Linger and the others with contempt. Linger just wanted to tear Lu Muyen into tens of thousands of pieces inwardly, but she didn't reveal it on her face. She didn't look weak and pitiful, but was instead gentle and generous, so that the men present could see the difference between her and Lu Muyen, that vulgar woman. Whether you want to help us or whether you want to take the opportunity to steal some points, everyone knows it in their hearts. Lu Muyen raised an eyebrow. Young Miss Shui, don't take everyone here for a fool. Linger didn't expect that Lu Muyen wouldn't play the cards by the rules and actually told everyone her little schemes. Lu Muyen sneered in a domineering and arrogant attitude, as if looking down upon the world emanated from her. So what if I'm bullying you? Linger took a deep breath, her eyes looking tactful, and her tone changed as she sighed. Young Miss Lu, Linger wonders how Linger has offended you, making you embarrass me every time we meet. You're just unpleasant to my eyes. Lu Muyen was too lazy to go around in circles with her. What did other people's opinions have to do with her? Linger had a mouthful of blood stuck in her chest. This woman definitely must have done it on purpose. Pfft. Luo Li couldn't resist laughing aloud and said in cooperation, I also don't think she's pleasing to my eyes. It means that something strange and or unexpected has occurred. The men present were all either proud children of heaven from large kingdoms or superpower kingdoms, so they didn't care about the means used between women at all. In a world where strength was respected, there were women like Xue Linger everywhere, and it was even more impossible for women like that to become lifelong partners. On the contrary, Lu Muyan's arrogant, wild attitude won the hearts of the several people more. Only such women were qualified to be treated as equals and stand shoulder to shoulder with. Lu Muyan, what qualifications do you have to be so arrogant in front of me, you being a person from the Lu clan from Yenzhou, that small kingdom? Xue Linger truly hated her to the extremes. In her eyes, Lu Muyan, aside from being trash, was just a young miss from a small clan. She was inferior to the elite pupils of distinguished clans like them. Yet she didn't expect that this woman would be arrogant ever since the glacial mountain range, and was now even more domineering, considering herself the best in the world. Lu Muyan chuckled with ridicule in her eyes. Now I'll let you see if I'm qualified to be arrogant in front of you. The cruelest way to deal with the enemy wasn't to kill her, but to play her to death. Xue Linger, a woman with good talent and self-confidence, cared about her image the most, especially in front of the elite men around them, so she would make her lose all face. I'll be afraid of you? Xue Linger snorted coldly. Her talent was indeed excellent among the 10 distinguished clans in the eastern region. Lu Muyan only knew unconventional skills, so in terms of the path of the sword, she definitely wouldn't lose to her. Go! Lu Muyan didn't say much nonsense and snapped her fingers. A cluster of flames suddenly emerged from beneath Xue Linger's feet and quickly burnt her skirt. Xue Linger was unprepared and screamed, "Pu." The 5 people who came with her wanted to step forward to help, but they were blocked by Luoli, who jumped out of the fire frame. Half of the lower hem of Xue Linger's dress was burnt off, exposing her 2 fair legs. Looks like I've done you a big favor. Xue Linger dodged a cluster of fire and looked at her coldly, asking, "What do you mean? Didn't you plan to seduce these people? Now that your shining white thighs are exposed, their eyes are all stuck to it, so wouldn't they perfectly be hooked?" Lu Muyan stretched out her hand and pointed randomly in the direction of Luo Yi, Luo Li, He Lian Lai, Yan Jun and Mo Ling. Although she couldn't see a few figures in the distance in the dark, but the temperament and strength that they exuded helped her judge that they were definitely people from elite teams of large kingdoms, so she just pointed towards those few auras randomly. The several people's faces turned black. When did she see that their eyes were all stuck to it? A bunch of women like Xue Linger would come and deliver themselves to their doors on their own initiative without even a hook of their finger. Did they still have to look on purpose? Why are you pointing to me, woman? Even if such a thing came to my door and stripped herself naked begging for me to look, this young master wouldn't even bother taking a look. Don't tarnish my reputation. Luo Li saw that Lu Muyan pointed at him just now and instantly exploded. Even if his eyes were covered in gunk, it would be impossible for him to fall in love with that kind of woman. He Lian Lai couldn't resist twitching the corners of his lips. He was just bored before, so he only played with Xue Linger when he saw that Xue Linger wanted to scheme against him, so why was it that when Lu Muyan said it, it was as if they were all very hungry. Yan Jun glanced at Xue Linger with disgust, then raised his head to look at Mo Ling and blinked. Were your eyes stuck on her? Mo Ling glanced at him and spat out a word coldly, boring. Then his eyes fell on Lu Muyan thoughtfully. Oh, so you're interested in that woman? Yan Jun joked. She arranged the fire array. Mo Ling whispered, so she's Lu Muyan. It was only then that Yan Jun remembered that Lu Muyan had just controlled the fire array and made the other party very embarrassed. Who knew that her talent in arrays would be so strong? I'm afraid she's not weaker than you, right? Yan Jun's words were somewhat tentative. Mo Ling pondered for a little, then said, stronger than me. Lu Muyan's attainments and learnings on the path of the array were definitely superior to him, and a thought of wanting to exchange pointers with her rose in his heart. Yan Jun's amorous peach-shaped eyes showed a rare look of astonishment. To make Mo Ling say such words, the attainments in the path of the array of that woman from a small kingdom named Lu Muyan seemed to be really good indeed. Xue Linger saw that none of the men present came out to speak for her, and Lord Luo's younger brother was even rude to her. A thin layer of mist rose in her eyes, and she turned to look at Lord Luo. But she only saw him holding a silver longsword and didn't even look at her. Accompanied by his silver clothes, when his sword rose and fell, there was an indescribable noble charm. Lu Muyan followed her gaze to look at Luo Yi, and the ridicule in her eyes grew even stronger. Xue Linger even took a fancy to Luo Yi, having high standards but little ability. Truly, why not go look in the mirror first? Fortunately, such a woman already annulled the engagement with her elder cousin brother, otherwise who knows how many green hats one Ling faced. Fortunately the Xue clan and the Ling clan already annulled the engagement, otherwise my elder cousin brother's head would be covered with green clouds every day. Xue Linger suddenly felt extremely humiliated. Ling Fei Yang used to be a genius of the 10 distinguished clans alongside Yi Qing Han. But how could he still be worthy of her after his legs were crippled from being poisoned? Why did she have to wrong herself? Ling Fei Yang was her betrothed. Shouldn't he come out to help when she was being bullied by a devil cultivator? She didn't think she did anything wrong. Lu Muyan, your elder cousin brother and I broke off our engagement purely because I only feel a brotherly love towards him, and I don't want to delay the rest of his life. Xue Linger looked at Lu Muyan with a serious face. The hands clenching her longsword already turned white. You hate and slander me because of this. I originally wanted to let you go for the sake of the Ling clan, but now you're also insulting and humiliating me, so I won't be polite to you again. She must mercilessly kill Lu Muyan here today so that she could resolve the hatred in her heart. Yeah. When my elder cousin brother was a genius, you chased after him every day and pestered him, afraid that he'd be taken away by other women. Then when he was injured by the devil cultivator and his legs were crippled, you only have brotherly love towards him and just wanted to hide as far as possible. Lu Muyan acted out a look of surprise, and her voice increased a little bit, so it turns out that it's because you don't want to delay him for the rest of his life. Oh, admirable, admirable, how about I get the Dongshuan Kingdom's imperial family of the eastern region to set up a chastity memorial tablet for you? She remembered that Dongxuan Kingdom was the strongest kingdom in the eastern region and could even be ranked among the large kingdoms on Tianling continent. The Shui clan was within the territory of the Dongxuan Kingdom. Didn't Shui Linger want to show off her most beautiful side in front of these men? Then of course she would fulfill her beautiful name. Pfft. Luo Li couldn't resist laughing and looked at He Lianlai, saying, "Seventh Prince, why don't you go back and set up a chastity memorial tablet for the daughter of the Shui clan?" He didn't miss Shui Liner's obsessive eyes when she looked at his elder brother just now. This sort of ungrateful person still wanted his elder brother? Was she worthy? A woman cheating on a man. There's a story that is believed to be the origin of this saying about how a woman would wear a green hat as a signal to the man she cheated on with that her husband wasn't home and for him to come meet her. He Lianlai couldn't resist twitching the corners of his eyes when he heard Lu Muyan and Luo Li's words. Was he getting stabbed even when he was lying down, minding his own business? Lu Muyan, you bully people too much. Today, I must teach you a lesson. Shui Linger was shaking with anger. When she used to talk to other women, they would all follow her words and speak accordingly, then they would become ensnared by her words without knowing it. But Lu Muyan, this tigress, played cards unreasonably, was arrogant and domineering and had no regards for face. Just with you? Lu Muyan smiled indifferently without even giving any looks of contempt. Shui Linger was provoked again by her unconcerned eyes. I heard that the last time you fought with the EC Empire, you used the 5 elements mutual inhibition law. Now I will let you have a taste of it as well. After she finished speaking, she poured the water elemental energy in her body into the long sword she held in her hand and swung dozens of sword auras against the flames that kept rising from the ground. Shui Linger's comprehension of the water element law had already reached the state of the understanding realm, and the sword aura she wielded contained a strong water element. The blue water balls turned into streaks of light, instantly extinguishing the flames erupting from the ground. Lu Muyan, your fire elemental energy is nothing much. Shui Linger's eyes concealed a smug smile. Lu Muyan swept Shui Linger with her gaze casually and said coldly, the 5 elements mutual inhibition law doesn't apply for everyone. Do you think that you can win me simply by having water elemental energy? Truly indulging in your wildest fantasy. She didn't say any more, and pinched her hands together, quick. Earth could inhibit water, but she didn't want to use the earth attribute elemental energy to deal with Shui Linger. On one hand, it was because she hadn't comprehended it deep enough, and on the other, she didn't want to expose that she could comprehend numerous elemental laws. So what if water inhibits fire? With her fire elemental energy law comprehended to the great achievement realm, she could still suppress Shui Linger's water element. Boom boom. The earth trembled a few times, and a crimson wall of fire spouted from the ground. Shui Linger's dozens of sword auras containing the water element instantly evaporated into water vapor. Shui Linger's pupils constricted, and she bit her lip. She formed a few seals before her chest and the water elements all over her body swarmed into the longsword. Water moon slash. She let out a tender shout with a proud look in her eyes. This was the strongest sword skill of their Shui clan. Lu Muyan could consider herself lucky to be able to die under her final blow using all her strength. A violent force burst out from Shui Linger's sword, turning into hundreds of blue crescent moons that curved into the air and greeted the wall of fire controlled by Lu Muyan. Seeing that Shui Linger had used her strongest means, the ridicule on Lu Muyan's lips grew even stronger. She wanted to kill her by using just these means? This woman truly underestimated her opponent. She stretched out her hands and pinched a few more Taoist seals. After the wall of fire was smashed by Shui Linger's sword aura, a giant fire dragon emerged from the ground, opened its mouth, and swallowed the rounds of blue crescent moons into its belly in just a few moments. After finishing, it made a humanized burp. It was as if it were alive, and the entire dragon was coiled above Shui Linger's head, looking at her with a scorching gaze. The smile on Shui Linger's face froze. How was this possible? She took a deep breath, raised her sword, and slashed maniacally towards the fire dragon in midair. All the elemental energy gathered in her longsword exploded outwards, turning into a huge blue crescent moon that tore through the sky. The blue crescent moon carried a dense water element, as if it could easily destroy the fire dragon, and was even more imposing. Everyone concentrated on watching the two fight and was actually surprised by Shui Linger's strength. It seemed that this woman wasn't just an embroidered pillow one. This sort of water element condensation had also reached a relatively high level of comprehension. Do you think that Lu Muyan's fire is powerful, or that Shui whatever's water element is powerful? Mo Ling looked at the giant dragon hovering in the air with deep eyes. Naturally Lu Muyan's fire is more powerful. Really? Yan Jun raised an eyebrow and said, water can inhibit fire. From the perspective of the imposing momentum, that woman's sword skill is more powerful than the fire dragon. You already have the answer in your heart, so why do you still need to ask me? Mo Ling gave Yan Jun a cold look. This man always made him unable to guess what he was thinking. It was best to keep as little contact with him as possible. Yan Jun's eyes were deep, and he looked at the fire dragon thoughtfully. One move can determine the outcome. Although the fire dragon didn't seem to have the imposing manner of the blue crescent moon, but the fire elemental energy was much purer than the water elemental energy. Water can inhibit fire? What a joke. In the face of unequal power, everything was unfounded. The blue crescent moon slashed down heavily, landing entirely on the fire dragon. There seemed to be a ridicule in the boundless eyes of the fire dragon. Sure enough, the powerful-looking blue crescent moon that seemed to have an imposing manner merely embedded into the fire scales of the fire dragon but couldn't enter any further at all. The fire dragon roared into the sky, and the 4 sharp claws condensed by fire elemental energy instantly tore the blue crescent moon into countless pieces. Drops of water fell from the sky. Linger's strongest sword skill condensed with water elemental energy was just completely and cleanly destroyed by the power of one claw of the fire dragon made from fire elemental energy condensation. Before the water droplets fell to the ground, the heat from the fire dragon evaporated them all and they disappeared. Linger's face paled. She was obviously one stage higher than Lu Muyen in cultivation base. It was the first time that she had uncertainty in her heart. No. It couldn't be. Lu Muyen must have used some tricks, that's why she lost. Do you still want to fight? Lu Muyen asked, looking at Linger with her arms folded. Linger bit her lower lip, looking stubborn and unyielding. Lu Muyen, if you have the ability, don't use these unconventional skills. Lu Muyen didn't even bother looking at the man, ignoring him completely and looked past him to Linger. It'll give you a chance to live. It'll give you an hour to escape. If my fire dragon doesn't kill you, then I'll consider you lucky. Seeing Lu Muyen completely ignore him, there was anger in the man from the Xian clan, but he didn't dare to offend her. Linger's eyes flickered, and she still said stubbornly, a soldier accepts death rather than humiliation. She was looking for an opportunity to escape. She sure didn't want to die here right now. She stretched out her hand and tugged the sleeve of the man from the Xian clan, saying softly, don't worry about me, you just leave. The man turned his head to look at her gentle and beautiful face, and his heart toughened. Is what you said just now true? Naturally. There won't be an hour left if you keep delaying. Lu Muyen played with a strand of her hair casually. The man from the Xian clan turned around, and instantly pulled Linger, flying away with her. From the backs of the two, Linger appeared to be struggling and it was all just that man's wishful thinking. One pretty but not useful. The Xian clan's sword cultivator forcibly took Linger away and soon disappeared from everyone's sight. The curve of Lu Muyen's lips raised slightly and said to the circling fire dragon, go, just don't play them to death. The fire dragon, as if understanding her words, let out a low growl and slowly chased in that direction beneath the moonlight. Aren't you going to kill her? Luoli walked up to Lu Muyen, and because he was so close, there was a refreshing scent of medicinal herbs lingering on the tip of his nose. His mind swayed and his expression felt a little unnatural. It's not good to let the tiger return to the mountain. He didn't miss the scheming in the eyes of that woman surnamed Shui just now, and only that stupid man would be enchanted to have lost reason. Don't you think it's more interesting to play her to death? Lu Muyen raised an eyebrow and smiled. Even more interesting? If you let her escape, she'll definitely seek revenge from you in the future. Luo Li's principle in dealing with enemies was to kill to avoid future troubles. Lu Muyen shrugged without care, it's too easy for her to die like this. I want her to collapse into the dust when she's high on the clouds and make her experience the feeling of unable to beg for life or death. Her elder cousin brother Ling Fei Yang was injured and crippled by that devil cultivator, then his betrothed broke off the engagement, bringing shame to the clan. Only he understood the feelings in his heart. He was tortured by the curse and poison every day, enduring physical and mental pain unimaginable by ordinary people, but he couldn't ask for death. Linger, this culprit, not only had no guilt, but also felt that it was only right. She also wanted to let Linger have a taste of this, not to die, but to never have the power to retaliate. From a proud daughter of heaven to the abandoned daughter of the Shui clan. She would make her understand that it only took an instant for one to fall from heaven to hell. You're such an unreasonable woman. Luo Li was startled and turned his head away awkwardly. But there wasn't a trace of feeling that she was too cold. You look like a cat that had exploded in anger. Luo Li was stunned for a moment, then, after speaking, without waiting for Lu Muyen to speak, he jumped into a circle of fire and began to frantically kill demonic beasts, concealing the throbbing feeling of his heart. Lu Muyen couldn't resist laughing happily, and the silver bell-like clear voice echoed. Then, she leapt up and controlled the 10 flying swords to shuttle through the fire array, killing the demonic beasts trapped in the array extremely quick. The elegant, refined man standing in the sky looked at Lu Muyen deeply, but in the end, he didn't make a move as his lips raised into a meaningful arc. This human woman was this interesting, it was a pity to kill her now. Hell, keep her until then. After making this decision, he waved his sleeve lightly to remove the telepathy runes gathered around the beast tide, turned, and disappeared into the darkness. With the Tier 7 demonic beast leader having lifted the order to gather, the surging demonic beasts looked around in confusion now and felt the scorching aura around them, disliking it very much. They turned their heads in the direction they came from and ran back. Because there were no more demonic beasts gathering, and the thousands of demonic beasts that had gathered before were also divided into countless waves by Lu Muyen's fire array, when dawn was approaching, this wave of a large beast tide was completely destroyed in their hands. Mo Ling, Yan Jun, and the others, seeing this, didn't remain. Whether Lu Muyen was the dark horse of this session or not, and whether she could break out of the tight encirclement or not, they had some expectations in their hearts. When the last wave of demonic beasts was killed, the 7 round and smooth jade stones buried deep in the ground all shattered into powder, and the fire that filled the plain gradually faded, finally disappearing. Lu Muyen's forehead overflowed with a thin layer of sweat. She raised her head and looked in the direction where the transformation stage demon cultivator was before, and some confusion and disappointment flashed across her eyes. She originally wanted to fight the Tier 7 demonic beast and break through her cultivation base bottleneck, but who knew that the demon cultivator only watched the battle but didn't appear? Why was that? Mo Yen, why didn't that demon cultivator show up? Mo Yen laid lazily on Lu Muyen's shoulder and said slowly, he doesn't want to kill you yet. Why? Lu Muyen asked with furrowed willow brows. She didn't think that her charm was so great that it could get that Tier 7 demon cultivator to show pity and tender care for Jade. In this world that respected strength, appearance served only as foil. Whoever's fist was the biggest, whoever had the right to speak. The law of survival among the demon race was even more so. There were too few strong sword masters and high-level demon cultivators who were greedy for beauty. Must be because of some secret. Mo Yen felt that the demon cultivator's attitude was very strange. His cultivation base is in late phase tier 7. Even if a few of you are strong, but it's impossible for him to be afraid. I just feel that there's something strange with all the high-level demon cultivators in this competition space. Let's take a step at a time and see. Now, the most important thing is to advance to the top 10 in the preliminary round. Lu Muyen looked at her rankings that had jumped to 37th place. It really was difficult to advance to the top 10 in points. The higher the rankings, the greater the difference in points. Your points are increasing very quickly already. Luo Li saw that she was looking down at the points with a bit of dissatisfaction. Lu Muyen chuckled. No. Luo Li glanced at her and muttered, do you need to be comforted? I'll surpass you very soon. Luo Li raised an eyebrow and said proudly, how's that possible? Sure. Let's compete to see who can enter the top 10. Luo Li really didn't know where her confidence came from. After cleaning up the battlefield, Lu Muyen also looked a little tired. Luo Yi and the others were also planning to change cities to begin with, so they followed. Seeing that the two groups of people didn't even have the intention to care about them, He Lian Lai's eye twitched. Could he be an invisible person? So he followed up as he waved his folding fan and walked to Lu Muyen's side, saying with a smile, young Miss Lu, it's a pleasure to meet you. Lu Muyen glanced at him and replied indifferently, pleasure to meet you. He Lian Lai kept waiting for her next line, but who knew that she didn't intend to continue speaking at all. He choked. Did she want to send him away with just those words? OOPS, a day late, for some people around the world, but happy Valentine's